We are going to be talking about Africa first. It's an Africa month, and we are going to be addressing opportunities within the creative space, and as well as in the African continent, especially for young people. I've seen there's quite a lot of young people. In my team, I've got Patson. Patson is from Africa Union, Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. You know that? Addis Ababa. So he's the Deputy Presiding Officer for Africa Union, Economics, Social and Culture. That's what he's responsible for. And he's here today to address us about the framework, especially youth perspective of Africa Union.
Good day, distinguished colleagues, and thank you for having me. Yes, I live in Addis Ababa and I do my things from Addis. However, I grew up on South African TV, so you can imagine how starstruck I was to walk into this room and see almost everyone I grew up watching. You know, so I think for me it's a great honor to be here to share perspectives from our field in diplomacy, and hopefully you'll also think of me as fondly as I think of you by then. Yes.
Thank you very much. I've got Dikeledi. Dikeledi is the founder of Afro Usawa, Director of Africa Youth Institute, and also lecturer at the Africa Thabo Mbeki University of Leadership and Pan-African Federalist Movement Chairperson. He is also part of the Young Ambassador of Africa Union, and also she works with Zama Qambi Fellowship Program. Can you please greet the audience?
And I'm here. It's the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute. I just wanted to, it's not a university, it would be a pleasure one day perhaps for it to become a university, considering the mandate that we have, which is centered around conscientization and also advancing the idea of Pan-Africanism. I'm a Pan-Africanist now. Most of my work is centered around that, right? So when I summarize the things that I do, it's that I'm a researcher, I'm an academic, and I'm an activist, and all of my work is centered around that. So coming from a different field, political science, and being in this space, I'm hoping that perhaps the conversation will be able to see synergies, right, or opportunities in terms of what we are actually going to share with regards to a continental framework, vis-a-vis what, all the amazing people in the room are doing. Thank you very much.
We've got John Muteba. John Muteba is the founder and CEO of Pan-Africa Chamber of Commerce. He also runs South Africa Film and TV Academy. He's passionate about storytelling, and he's busy with Afroworld. So we've got Sollywood, Hollywood, Nollywood, Bollywood, and Afriwood. Please greet us.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Zama said, I am a storyteller. I'm a Pan-Africanist. I work with Dikeledi, and also I work with Tando here. My interest basically is around shaping the African narrative, because we know that the biggest problem we have as a continent is actually a PR disaster. Many, many times what we don't know is that it's not just because we've had very bad leaders in Africa that we have a very bad name internationally, but it also a number of factors, especially globally, if I have to say, where people wake up in the morning, they dress, they go to work, and they basically make sure that Africa has a bad name because they are benefiting from it. So in that position in Africa as a place that needs to be saved, they would be the very person who are coming and saying, we can actually save you because you, as Africa, you can actually save yourself. So as a filmmaker, as a person who produces media and a person who consumes media as well, I work in the business of image. And we have to work basically, all of us here today, to sort of decolonize the image of our continent. So I'm basically speaking about opportunities from an economic development point of view on the African continent from a youth perspective. So I'm not youth anymore, but I work in that space. I've worked in that space for the past 15 years, so definitely I think there's a lot we're going to be sharing today to make sure that we take this sector forward at the same time about the youth of our continent. Thank you.
We've got a South Africa Heritage Ambassador. Where is it? Okay. She also runs Embo Media. Her name is Tando. Please greet us.
Salmonani Moludi Dumela. Ninja. Nangya, I'm so Nikateleme. So you tired? No. Okay, thank you. My name is Tando Songwevu. I am the founder of Embo Africa, and Embo Africa is focused on the cultural and creative industries, where I'm finding the economical value within these sectors and linking it with the continent and the rest of the world. I'm also currently the Heritage Ambassador for South Africa, and this was an award that I got from the Department of Arts and Culture for the work that I do, which promotes South Africa continentally and globally. My work is endorsed by various institutions in South Africa and outside South Africa, the likes of the Thabo Mbeki Foundations, Africa Union, specifically the Continental Free Trade Area Unit. Basically, I'm also into events, so I understand all the frustrations that are here, and I'm hoping that my talk will actually inspire you to look at things differently so that you could be able to attract funding, not just in South Africa, but outside South Africa. Because you all know that our government does not have money. So they say.
That cannot be true. Okay, Patson is passionate about the United States of Africa. This is a topic which has been mentioned. The aspiration, I know there's a blueprint which was done in 2013 about that, our new culture and identity as an African continent. And also, he's passionate about the 10-year plan which has been drafted to say from now until from 2013 until 2023, young people, how are they going to improve their lives in the African continent. Also, he's going to be sharing with us in terms of intergenerational partnership strategy within the African continent. Once we open the borders so that in the creative space, all of us, we can be able to do business together. Patson, what do you say?
With regards to opening the borders. Well, I would say particularly with regards to the framework in which we need to get the United Africa going, we need to look more into the technicalities of it. It's one thing to say we want a United States of Africa. It's another thing to draw it. What does it look like? Who runs it? Who's the president? I think that question alone would already destroy the whole idea of a United States of Africa, right? Now, Agenda 2063, however, which is the 50-year development plan of the African Union, looks into how do we look and leverage on the sovereignty of all member states and work towards a collective goal so that we can mobilize resources both internally and externally so that we can be able to achieve a collective development success. So one of the key elements of that is actually with regards to having a economic unity. So that's basically based firstly in the form of a free trade area, which has been enacted by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which basically will allow for goods and peoples to move freely across the continent. Now, the administration of that is actually made better by us having borders and also by us having federal republics, so as to allow for each administration to both implement and also report on how things are going. So the moment you take away the vision of a united Africa from the people and then put it into an institution, you basically marginalize them from the actual implementation. So that's one of the things that Agenda 2063 is trying to get rid of. Now, in terms of intergenerational partnerships, this has been a very difficult question to answer. Because of the fact that you say, yes, we want to work together as different generations, but how? How do we give each other space? What do we mean by that space? Does it mean that it's an earned space? Is it a token space? Is it a space that is supposed to be fought over? You know, these are things that, unfortunately, policy cannot answer. It's going to have to be a matter of relationship building and also a showing from both sides that indeed we are looking towards working with one another. And another key component, because I'm a young person, I'm actually the youngest senior official in the African Union, right? And for me, it wasn't a matter of getting there because I am the best person there. No, I saw a need and I worked towards it from my teenage life up until now, which is not too long ago, by the way, just in case you're thinking I'm losing hair because of age. No, it's because of the stress of working between teenagers to now. But as for getting to that space, it was a matter of deciding that I need to get the trust of the people who I need to work with. And how do I gain that trust? By being efficient, by delivering, by being honest, by being integral. When I say I'm going to do something, you do it. That is something very important within bureaucracy. So I think that are the main facets that I would present.
Thank you. Staging and lighting, you can see. As an African continent, we've reached a stage where we can develop this. I know most of the time, stage and lighting and all this, they are being developed from outside African continent, and they are bringing it here. If you talk about human development, manufacturing component of it, do you think women are there in the But what must we do in order to invest in the creative industry within the African continent? For example, I'm just looking in terms of maybe there are so many venture capitals now in the African continent, but you might find that even 10% of those venture capitals, they're not owned by women. So when we talk about women development, especially the creative space, maybe what do you think must we address?
Okay, I guess just to perhaps backtrack a bit to what Patson was saying, right? So part of the Agenda 2063 is, I guess, summarizing under 7 aspirations, right? And one of the aspirations, which I think slightly, actually 2 of them, which speak to your question, would be the aspiration basically for a prosperous Africa, right? Which is premised on inclusive growth and development. And I think one of the aspects, one of the goals there is to work around transforming the economies of the continent, right? And then we then have another aspiration as well, which speaks to an inclusive, or a development that is led by the people themselves. And there's an emphasis on inclusion of women as well as young people, right? And then that in itself then speaks to goals around gender equality. So when you think about that, and we think about sort of economic restructuring, this is where manufacturing actually comes in, right? The importance of actually, sort of adding value to the products that we consume, right? As you said, when we look around the room, the basic tenets of all these products that are in here, the basic tenets of all these, machines that are utilized in the space, actually come from somewhere, right? And manufacturing is part of that. And I think that's one of the elements that we, as people who are in the service sector, particularly people who are in the entertainment sector, that would be another avenue as well if you're thinking about moving back, in terms of the value chain, like really way back, and perhaps the manufacturing industry could be one of it, as opposed to perhaps in the future, instead of us importing Sony products, which are creating jobs in China or wherever Sony products are manufactured, right? And that also then speaks to issues around employment within the continent as well, right? So youth employment, which is basically something that we have a challenge with. The same with women as well, right? And now if we talk about women, yes, of course, there are challenges that women are facing in terms of ownership, be it in the manufacturing sector or any other sector for that matter, right? I'm not privy to the statistics, particularly in in the entertainment industry, in terms of the, ownership of, women entrepreneurs, particularly in this space. But I can assume, just looking at, what has been happening throughout other sectors, that it's possibly very, very poor, right? And now then the question would be, why is that happening, right? What kind of support that is needed, that has to be offered. And this does not mean that in certain instances that the support is not there. Let's say, for instance, I'll go back to the manufacturing example. We have here in South Africa, whereby the state has invested heavily in industrial policy. And part of this industrial policy has brought about financing some of these projects, right? So there's money pumped into giving people money to do, and also the DTI is also, by the way, financing film as well. Right? So now then the question is, so yes, there's money and there's a call for women to actually be a part of this. Yet this is not happening. Right? Now the question would be, there's money? If there is money, then why? What are the factors, right? And I think perhaps we really need to study that intensely. There are people who've done the studies, but I think maybe we'll have another session for that.
Patson, you believe in Africa first, and especially when we talk about young people, you said we believe in youth dividends, entrepreneurship from the chamber perspective. You're coming from DRC, and what I wanted to know, you believe that Africa has got a growing population among young people, and you believe that maybe that will its own an opportunity for us as an African continent. Think about it. If you go to Japan, you might find that in Japan, the population is aging. But in the African continent, you have young people compared to the older generation. But how can we tap into this creativity of young people and then be an active role player in breaks, especially in the creative sector? You mentioned you are in the creative sector, Philips. You mentioned Afri-Woods, and you mentioned the university which we intend to do to the African continent. So how can you tap into this creative young people in the film space and also in the creative space?
Okay, Johnny is my name. I forgot. God me Patson. But it's okay. Patson's here. Okay. What I want to say is that 70% of the population in Africa is under the age of 30. That's an always an opportunity. If I have to tell my discussion now, there's going to be about 1.2 billion opportunities on the African continent. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have as a continent is to see this youth dividend as a problem. Because the very countries that are struggling with aging populations are now telling us, as a continent that is way ahead, that can use the productivity, the energy, the power, the understanding of young people, that it's actually a problem. So by 2035, the African continent will have the biggest workforce in the world, basically. You can combine China and India, they're actually going to be able to beat Africa. Where we are now, in terms of getting ourselves ready for that opportunity, which is just from 15 years away, it is actually 5,708 days, to be quite specific. And when you look at that, you will think it's far, but it's actually not far. So if you're talking about opportunities for young people, what I want to say is that the fact that we've got this youth population, and of course by 2035 it's even going to grow further, we need to start by understanding how we get these young people ready for the economy of 2035. Because as we know, we are here where we are today because of what was done before. There was colonialism, in the case of South Africa, apartheid here. But we need to understand that the future of the African continent lies in the hands of young people. And it's only when they are empowered with skills. Yesterday I was talking about the mismatch of skills in terms of what institutions of higher learning are producing and what the market needs. So empowering young people today to acquire these skills for them to compete then in that economy, I think is an opportunity. On entrepreneurship, we know that entrepreneurship is not kind of a one-size-fits-all that can actually come and solve the problem. But speaking to entrepreneurship as well, I need to mention that every single year, we have about 11 million young people who get into the labor market. This is Africa-wide. And it's only 3 million who are actually employed. So every single year, if you put that number times 10, you will actually have close to 70 million young people who have gone to study but are not able to work. So we have to empower entrepreneurs. The source basically for us there is that we empower SMEs, they will then be able to create jobs. So creating opportunities for young people, especially now as the African Union is talking about the free continental trade area, we were in Kigali last year when it was actually signed. We have to make sure that we grow the local economies, we grow the regional economies. We're talking about Africa earlier on. We see that within the region alone we have a population of about 270 million people. So that is again an opportunity within the region in terms of the languages we speak that are quite common. So I think the power here is to empower young people to run their own businesses, give them skills to become employable and get them ready for the jobs of tomorrow.
Tando, you are passionate about cultural exchange program and you are against xenophobia because you believe that maybe xenophobia has got a direct impact on the way we are doing business in South Africa. And also, there is when we attended the Durban tourism in Ghana this year, there were few people from the African continent who attended because of the xenophobia. And also, we are doing some events. What are the impacts of having some events in the African continent, our own events? I know you are doing quite a lot of events in the African continent. And also, how can the policy, maybe of cultural diplomacy, have an impact in terms of how we interact as an African continent?
Okay, thank you, Zama. Firstly, I think the problem starts there because currently we don't have a cultural diplomacy policy, which is a big problem because how are you expected to work with the rest of the African continent without a policy? Going back to terms of xenophobic attacks, Afrophobia, you know, Dikelate is a scholar. She might tell you more of the difference between Afrophobia and xenophobia, because xenophobia is always crime-related, but Afrophobia is just black on black hate. And it's actually quite sad, the fact that in 2019, we still have those attacks, especially in the African continent. I think there's a lot of love. I think there's a lot of work that not only the government, but also us as a people, we need to do in terms of integrating the rest of the African continent. Let us not forget that the borders that we have were not constructed by us, they were constructed by the colonizers. So it was the divide and rule. So we need to actually go back and know that we as African people are one people, firstly. And in terms of Afrophobia, xenophobic attacks and business, it actually puts South Africa in a very, very bad light. Specifically looking at the fact that our president is going to be the chairperson of the African Union next year. All eyes are going to be on South Africa. Less than a month ago, we had xenophobic attacks in Durban, and that also contributed to the attendance of the tourism in Daba, which is hosted in Durban every single year. And it's actually quite sad, also as South Africans who actually work with the rest of the African continent, where we have to go to these stages and actually apologize on behalf of the country of what is happening in South Africa. But like I said, I think there's still a lot that will need to be done. One of the projects that I would love to do is actually on cultural exchange. I'm currently, for the past 8 years, I've been working with the diaspora, which is the 6th region of the continent. So from universities in the US, London, where we bring students to South Africa on study abroad programs. But now, I actually want to start doing a program where I could take the communities, like example, take people from Alexandra, from Soweto, take them just next door, which is 5 hours away, which is in Rwanda, in Kigali, so that they could actually go and see what happened in 1994, where there were tribalistic attacks between two tribes. So it is very bad that we as South Africans are still very xenophobic, because like I said, it's affecting us economically. People don't want to do business in South Africa because of these xenophobic attacks. And I believe that most of the people that are in this room are in the cultural and creative industries. We are supposed to advocate for African unity. It is actually quite sad, the fact that we only talk about African unity only in May. And my question is, when you wake up every single day from January up until March, what does that make you? You're still an African. So we really need to change our mindsets. But at the same time, I'm very proud of South Africa, because from 2020, we're introducing Iswahili into the curriculum. So at least there is some sort of integration that is going to be happening from that perspective. But I still think that there's still so much that needs to be done, because we cannot be killing our brothers and sisters. And the last thing I would say is that someone from Ghana, someone from Malawi or Nigeria, when they're in South Africa, they are not foreigners. They cannot be foreigners in their own land. Thank you.
Closing statement. If you can be given an opportunity to be a leader for one day, Patson, would you open the borders for the African continent, and how would you develop young people in one minute?
Okay. Being the leader that I am, I would say that the key component to developing, especially with regards to young people, would be an incorporation of culture-altering mechanisms, primarily entertainment, music, arts, theatre. You have no idea how powerful you are. Very good example. I flew out to Mozambique, came back 3 days later, and I was home in Cape Town. And I had a fever, and I was coughing. And that week, in that week's episodes of Generations, everyone was coughing, and they had this virus thing. So my grandmother says to my cousin, "Kanino Patson travelation. Maybe he needs to get checked for that virus." She doesn't even know that, it's made up. That's the amount of power you have on the population. So imagine if you can incorporate the aspirations of African development into all your storylines. Show us what intergenerational collaboration looks like. Show a guru with a young man being protéged into becoming a multi-millionaire. Show us young people getting into politics the right way. Show us families and all the likes. These are aspirations of the African Union. So working with you, I would be happy to get this type of message across. Thank you.
Once we open borders,
the borders are open. The borders are open. The only thing that needs to be realized is that the people must be open. The borders are open. It's the people who must be open.
Okay. I'm trying not to move into the academic my academic act. But apparently this man called Louis Fuzard, and one of the things that he speaks about is the ideological sort of apparatus of the state, how the state can use certain technology, particularly the media, right, as an element of power. And I think that's one of the things that I learned in my first year or second year degree. And I think as a result, that's how I got to really understand the power of the media, right? Particularly in the role that he has mentioned, right? And I will just practically say, this thing that I've been preaching literally for I don't know how many years, is can we take stories such as, the book, right? And there's so many beautiful stories and narratives in there. I remember reading that particular book and that's how it impacted my life and how I viewed myself as an African. So now imagine if we turned that particular book into a movie that all African children can actually read. This is how we viewed ourselves as Africans. This is how we understood our own African cosmology, right? Which is an integral part of our own identity and how we see ourselves. Like all those kinds of things. I mean, everybody's talking about Games of Thrones. And we're like, but we have our own ancient stories. which need to be actually, turned into film. So these are the things, and then for me, and then this I beg for all of you. We're talking about political unification of the continent, right? We're talking about this one Africa. Like, let us turn that into like visuals, right? That people can start believing for it. This is what a politically united continent would look like, and that would mean a show or a movie centered around a United States of Africa with a female president, hopefully, right? So how that would function, right? And then I think that will play a fundamental role, a very, very big role in shaping the consciousness around people, in opening people, because the borders are already open.
Thank you. We are in the film industry. What I was always telling people that if you don't have story, just go and buy Daily Sun. I'm busy compiling Daily Sun from last year in my house. And one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to say those who are involved in film or storytelling, they must come. If you want to know about the story of someone flying at night from the bed to the roof, you can. So think about it. South African story sells. 1.2 million viewers of Daily Sun every time. You don't have a story about South Africa. So you have seen Nollywood growing, you have seen Bollywood growing, Hollywood growing, Sollywood is growing, Afrowood, you're about to create it. How can you create jobs for young people, just in 1 minute?
It basically comes down to the center. And this center for me is African culture at the heart of economic development. We see that Nollywood, I love Nollywood, I'm a filmmaker. There are so many people in South Africa who live in the industry who call Nollywood. Basically, I don't know, a lot of things, like the quality, the sound, doesn't matter. People still watch that content. So for me, it's a successful African story. And what we're working on now, the African agenda for culture, is to make sure that culture is positioned in the heart of the economic development by just looking at the contribution of Nollywood to the Nigerian economy. We can do the same in South Africa. And by empowering as many young people as possible, my colleagues have already spoken about the power of the media. And when you see yourself on the screen, well represented, not framed, not somebody who is basically featured in an American way or positioned in a certain way, but we know also that the creative sector, the beauty with it, as far as film is concerned, they are not going to ask you for a degree. They just want to know if you can act. I'm a director, I'm a producer. I don't ask people, show me a degree. I think when Bonano was auditioning, they didn't ask for a degree. Today she's one of the most successful personalities, not only in South Africa, but on the continent. So the barriers to entry in the sector are actually very, very low. As long as you can act, it doesn't matter. Whether you act in isiZulu, you saw what happened with Nomzamo now. She started there in Sibaya. Today she's a global. So what has happened now with Patson Malisa and a lot of other African artists. See what is happening with Trevor now, for example. So let's make the means available because it's very expensive to study film. In our case, we want to make sure that they can study for free because they will then be able to contribute to the economy. Thanks.
Tando, you have been talking about big events like this one. Think about it, the impact it had in South Africa. We've got people from Netherlands all over, like in the Durban tourism now. We've got people all over the world. Durban International Film Festival, 62 countries, events. How can they create jobs for young people in 1 minute? We're running out of time.
Firstly, for me, events, they're actually very important because they build bridges. It's just that it's sad that we just don't have much time to talk about this, but hopefully Zama will be doing another event where we are basically looking at the events industry in the context of this continental free trade area. Because at the end of the day, it says no one will be left behind. In terms of events, like there's an event that I'm currently doing, which is called Chat Africa. It's looking at culture, heritage, arts, tourism, and trade. It is a rotating event from different countries with different chapters to different regional economic communities. So there are opportunities there, but we need to understand and go back to the government yet again that they still need to advocate on this continental free trade area because South Africa has signed and the borders are going to be open. there's going to be free movement of goods and people and services. So there is a lot of opportunity for this sector as the building bridge, because this is the sector which creates these platforms for this kind of dialogues. So these are very, very important. But you also, each and every single person here, you also need to be able to align the work that you're doing, your vision, in terms of this continental free trade area. Because at the end of the day, borders are open, and we are going to be doing business, intra-Africa trade amongst each other. Currently, right now, the services sector is doing very well in terms of filling, in terms of trade. But also, how do we get the women that are in the rural areas that make the beads? How do we make sure that we also get their products to be part of this value chain?